Elman dust storm. The sky looked like it was bleeding sand, the sun lost behind a wall of grit and heat. Radio chatter cracked through the static panic, orders, screams. Then, a single female voice cut through the noise. Some calm, steady, unshaken. Bravo Company, this is Valkyrie 1. I have visual, mark your smoke. Negative Valkyrie. Command says, stand down. She ignored it. The ridge below burned red. 280 American soldiers surrounded, pinned by Taliban fire. The forward observer's voice broke as he called out coordinates. In the command tent, silence replaced the chaos. Heads turned, disbelief spreading. She's taking charge? Hours earlier, the airfield was filled with laughter. You're flying cover for that mission? Good luck, sweetheart. They'll eat you alive out there. Engines roared, rattling the windows. She climbed into her A-10, sunlight flashing off the metal nose where her call sign was painted, Valkyrie 1. She tightened her harness, eyes sharp as glass. She knew what was coming, and what she was about to do would rewrite the field report forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Captain Riley Hayes arrived before sunrise and left after sunset, the kind of pilot who lived between checklists and silence. She moved through the hangar at Moody like a ghost, head down, helmet tucked tight, flight bag slung over one shoulder. Mechanics nodded. Crew chiefs stepped aside. She acknowledged no one but the airplane. She'd started in rescue. HH-60 Pavehawks, rotor wash in blizzards, voices breaking on the radio at 3 in the morning. She learned how to find people who were supposed to be unfindable. She learned how to bring them home when maps said it was impossible. Somewhere along the way, she traded rotors for straight wings, the Pavehawk's thrum for the A-10 snarl. Her hands were built for the hog. Short, strong fingers, no wasted motion. She could trim an approach by feel, correct a crosswind with a nudge of rudder, hold a gun run steady as a heartbeat. Everyone agreed she flew with impossible precision. Fewer agreed with the second half of her reputation, her refusal to play politics. At Moody, the line between respect and suspicion ran right through her locker. Some called her Valkyrie, like it was a salute. Others said it with a smirk. Rumors swirled in the ready room like jet wash. They said she'd frozen on a mission years ago. They said she'd refused a direct order. They said she'd saved an entire platoon and took the heat so someone else wouldn't. She never corrected the lore. She didn't chase approval or argue with whispers. She showed up. She pre-flighted. She flew. The A-10 she favored wore its age like a promise. Oil smudges in the same places every week. A panel latch that always needed persuasion. The crew chief, Tech Sergeant Lane, knew better than to fill the quiet with small talk. He'd hold the ladder while she climbed, hand her the straps, and step back. "You good, ma'am?" Lane would ask. "Good," she'd answer, eyes already scanning gauges. Her call sign, Valkyrie, wasn't painted loud. Just small letters near the nose art, where only hands that bled safety wire would notice. A superstition. Don't shout the name that carries the weight. Major Scott Delaney watched her from the glass office that looked out over the hangar. He was the kind of CO who knew every file by heart and every pilot by habit. Hayes was the one file he reread too often. The one habit he couldn't change. He'd tried to keep her in the box the Air Force preferred: competence, compliance, clean lines in the paperwork. But the edges never held. She was too calm where she should have deferred, too steady where others sought permission. He respected her flying more than anyone's. He didn't always trust what it would cost. "You're not cleared for Cass and Helman Hayes," he said the last time she pushed across his doorway without waiting to be called. "Last time you went off script." "Last time we brought them home, sir," she said, voice even. He looked at her for a long moment. Sunlight burned a rectangle on his desk. Dust motes hovered like waiting words. "That is not the point," he said finally. She didn't argue. She didn't glance at the awards wall, where his eyes kept drifting. She just stood there, helmet under her arm, like a person listening for weather beyond the building. The rumor about her freeze wasn't entirely wrong. There had been a pause, a heartbeat in a blizzard when rotor blades clipped a white world and the wind wanted to tear the doors off the bird. She had looked at the mountain, and the mountain had looked back. In that single breath, she weighed the order against the people bleeding in the snow. Then she went. The after-action report called it a delay. The men who could still hold a pen called it a miracle. The delay stuck in her file. The miracle lived in other people's kitchens, around other people's tables. Moody's runway had a particular way of shimmering at noon, heat lifting off the asphalt like a mirage you could walk into and drown. Hayes liked to taxi slow through that shimmer. It gave her time to put the day in its place. The tower voice, the checklist cadence, the way an A-10 became light, the second the main gear unlatched from the earth. These things were facts. Facts steadied you when rumors tried to pull you apart. She didn't go out with a squadron much. She didn't need the bar stools and the stories. Her apartment was bare as a briefing room, a coffee maker that never quite turned off, a small framed photo on the bookshelf, 5 aircrew shoulder to shoulder, snow in their hair, eyes too tired to be young, no medals on the wall. Just a dog-eared copy of an old flight manual and a pair of running shoes by the door. If she woke at 3, she went for a run. If she woke at 4, she made coffee and sat on the floor with her back against the couch, tracing routes in her head. There are pilots who fly to escape gravity and pilots who fly to keep promises. Riley Hayes flew for the second kind. Word of Sangan leaked in on a Monday that felt like a fever. A JTAC they all knew. Hill had sent a message through channels that went from routine to pleading without changing vocabulary. Bravo Company was outside the wire, under strength, pressed against a ridge, losing ground. 280 Americans with the desert tightening around them like a fist. Delaney pulled the door closed and read the situation report twice. He knew what would happen if he walked into the ready room and said the word Sangan. He knew who would look away, who would look at their boots, who would find a reason to check a maintenance log. He also knew who would step forward. Hayes didn't wait to be asked. She stood when the briefing slid into that quiet where everyone pretends to be thinking. Her chair scraped the floor once. Every face turned. "I'll go," she said. A flight lieutenant cleared his throat and found his voice first. "You're on local training this cycle." "Training can wait," she answered. Delaney forced a steady tone. "Not this again, Valkyrie. There are words commanders say to protect their pilots from the world, and words they say to protect the world from their pilots." Delaney wasn't sure which kind he'd just used. He felt the room take a breath it didn't deserve. Hayes didn't argue the doctrine. She didn't throw the rumor back in anyone's face. She kept her eyes on the map where the ridgeline cut the terrain into a wound no bandage could hold. "What's the weather?" she asked. "Dust," the intel officer said. "Visibility like soup." "Wind gusting. What's their ammo state? Low. Medical? Worse." She nodded once. "Not theatrical. Not brave in the way people act brave. Just a pilot measuring the gap between need and authority." In the hangar, Lane had already started prepping her bird because knowing someone is another kind of order. He pulled the safety pins, checked the tires, kissed his teeth at the same stubborn latch. When Hayes walked in and set her helmet on the wing root, he didn't look surprised. "Full load?" she asked. "As close as we can get without making her sulk," Lane said. He tried a smile that didn't quite fit. "They'll say you're overstepping again." "They can say what they want," she said. "I'll fly." The wingman assigned to her, Razor 2-1, was new enough to think swagger was a plan. He met her at the step desk, bouncing on his heels. "You going to ignore the boss again?" he asked, breadcrumbs of humor in his voice. "I'm going to follow the mission," she said. He sobered. "Copy." In the ready room, someone laughed too loud at nothing. Someone else pretended to check a weather update that hadn't changed. A captain sitting near the back muttered, "Good luck, sweetheart," and looked away fast when Lane turned his head. Delaney came down from the office because there are times a CO must stand where the wind is. He stopped beside her ladder, hat tucked tight against the gusts that threw grit into every pocket. "Hayes," he said. "Sir." "You know the ROE? You know the chain?" "Yes, sir." His jaw worked once like a man who'd rather lift a truck. "And you know what's out there?" "I do." He stared at the A-10 as if it might answer for her. He had 12 signatures on his desk that made him the man responsible for bringing his people back in one piece. 12 signatures that didn't erase memory. He'd been a young pilot once. He'd heard panic on the radio and felt helpless land like a stone in his chest. He wanted a cleaner world than the one he was handing her. "You're not cleared for Cass and Hellman, Hayes. Last time you went off script. Last time we brought them home, sir." He closed his eyes for the space of 2 words, then opened them into the dust. "Taxi to the hold," he said. "Await tasking." "Copy," she answered, and climbed. The canopy came down with that submarine thud that makes the world small in all the best ways. Her cockpit smelled like hydraulic fluid and old sun. She ran the checklist aloud, voice low, each item a rung on a ladder she trusted more than ground floors and office doors. Battery on. APU start. Engine 1 spool. Engine 2 spool. Gauges alive. Caution lights winking themselves into obedience. The gun, a sleeping animal under her feet. She didn't look at the photograph tucked in the knee pocket of her flight suit. She didn't touch the small ink under the edge of her glove. She didn't think about mountains and blizzards and one breath that had followed her into every room since. She thought about the JTAX coordinates and the ridgeline and the way a hog can make men on the ground stand up a little straighter just by arriving. On the radio, Hellman sounded far and near at once. Sand in the mic. Voices layered like bad weather. "Bravo. This is Hill. We are danger close on the east." "Say again, danger close." She listened as she taxied, the nose wheel chalking a slow line. Razor 2-1 rolled behind her, canopy glinting. The tower cleared them. The runway lay ahead like a dare, wheels up at rotation. Gear tucked. The earth fell away and the hog got light. She never smiled on departure. She never saluted the horizon. She leaned forward like she was trying to hear something the sky hadn't said yet. Some pilots fly into the unknown as if the unknown is a stage. Hayes flew into it like a conversation you cannot refuse. The ground called. She answered. At 10,000 feet, Delaney's voice came through the net flat, official, the voice of a man separating himself from his heart. "Valkyrie, you will hold west of the line. Await further." "Copy holding," she said. She set the anchor. She watched the clock. She listened to the wind slide over the canopy like a hand smoothing a sheet. Below and far away, 280 men tried to make themselves small in a place that punished the small. Every pilot in the squadron had his own private theology. Hayes had hers. It wasn't about luck. It wasn't about fate. It was about the promise you make when you put a name on an airplane and a human being on a map. Bring them home if you can. If you can't, don't let them die alone. The Met crackled. The dust thickened. Someone in the command tent cleared a throat. Someone else started to say the word weather like it could be an alibi. Hayes throttled forward a little and watched the fuel tick in a way that told the truth. She thought of the laughter in the ready room, and Lane's hands on the ladder and Delaney's eyes when he said her name. She thought of Hill's voice and the edge in it that meant they were running out of everything. Every pilot stepped back. She stepped forward. "I'll go," she had said, and under the roar and the rules and the dust, Delaney knew what he had always known. If there was anyone who could bring those men back, it was her. He just didn't know yet what it would cost them both. The radial erupted into chaos the second Hayes crossed into Hellman airspace. Every frequency seemed to bleed into the next panicked voices. Coordinates shouted over gunfire and the deep, dull thump of mortars somewhere below. She tightened her grip on the stick, eyes scanning the valley that stretched like a scar across the desert. "Bravo Company. This is Valkyrie 1 on station," she said, voice steady, almost calm. "I've got your position." Confirm smoke. A ragged reply cut through the static. Valkyrie, this is Hill. Green smoke, East Ridge. We're surrounded. Taking fire from 3 directions. RPGs, 50 cals. God, they're everywhere. She banked left, rolling her A-10 over the ridge. Below, the ground looked alive. Tiny bursts of light, muzzle flashes, fire creeping along the edges of broken terrain. Her instruments painted a picture of desperation, 280 men pinned down in a kill box, their ammo count dipping, medevac impossible. Command came through in her ear again, cold and sharp. Valkyrie 1, this is Overlord. Hold position and orbit at 10,000. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Her jaw clenched. Copy holding, she said, though her hand hovered near the trigger. 10,000 feet up, she could see the ridgeline twisting like a serpent, smoke blooming from impact craters. The evacuation route? Nothing but black marks where IEDs had detonated hours earlier. She listened to Hill's voice breaking over the comms, begging for air. We're losing ground. We need air now or we're done. She throttled forward slightly, feeling the A-10 hum through her bones. Beside her, Razor 2-1's voice crackled. Valkyrie, you hearing this? Command said, no go. We stay high. Hayes stared at the terrain, tracing the enemy's movements with her eyes, clusters of figures closing in on the trapped Americans. The smoke shifted, the wind carried it low. There was no time for permission. Razor 2-1, she said quietly. I'm going in. Negative, he barked. Command says hold. She clicked her mic off, rolled her bird hard into a dive, and the world became nothing but sound and fury. The A-10 screamed toward the earth, cannon armed, targeting reticle flashing red. The first burst from the GAU-8 Avenger split the valley open. 7 barrels spinning at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute, each shell the size of a soda can, tearing through the enemy line. Dust exploded upward, bodies scattered, the ground itself seemed to shudder. Good hit, Hill shouted, his voice suddenly filled with life. Razor 2-1 swore over the net. Jesus, Valkyrie, you're insane! She ignored him. Re-engaging. Mark your next target. Bravo Company was still taking fire, but the momentum had shifted. The enemy's advance slowed. Hayes pulled up low, the A-10's engines roaring inches above the ridge. Her heart hammered once, then steadied. She'd found her rhythm. Back at HQ, Delaney stood in front of the radar screen, his knuckles white on the edge of the table. She's dropped altitude to 300 feet, a technician said. She's gone rogue, Delaney muttered. Another officer, an older colonel, looked up. Or she's saving them. Delaney didn't answer. He just watched the blip on the radar loop tighter, closer, until it nearly vanished against the terrain. Down in the valley, Hayes lined up for a second run. Tracer rounds stitched the air past her canopy. She banked hard, the plane's frame shuddering. Warning lights blinked. Fuel dropping faster than she liked. Razor 2-1, keep your orbit, she said. I'm punching south for another pass. Valkyrie, you're not cleared. Copy that, she said, and went anyway. Her next strike hit the RPG nests that had blocked the evac route. One by one they detonated, shockwaves rippling through the sand. The men on the ground saw her silhouette cut across the sky, low, fearless, relentless. For the first time that day, they cheered. Hill's voice came again, softer now. Valkyrie, I don't know who you are, but you just bought us time. She didn't reply. Her eyes stayed locked on the terrain, every pass tighter than the last, every movement a gamble with physics and fate. Fuel warning blinking. Ammo count low. The A-10 wasn't built for elegance, but in her hands, it moved like a promise kept. She thought about the order she'd just broken, the report that would come, the court-martial whispers. None of it mattered. Not yet. Over the radio, the battlefield roared, 100 men shouting, machine guns clattering, hope clawing its way back into their voices. Hill called out new coordinates. She rolled in again, engines howling, cannon thundering. Dust lifted like smoke from a resurrection. In the command tent, Delaney exhaled slowly. God help her, he murmured, because right now, no one else could. The dust over Sangin had started to thin by mid-afternoon, but the sky still felt heavy, a bruised yellow that pressed down on every voice over the comms. Between gun runs, Captain Riley Hayes banked her A-10 west, letting the engines breathe. The cockpit vibrated with the low hum of victory and exhaustion. She looked down at her gloved hand resting on the throttle. Just visible under the edge of the Nomex, a faint ink mark shimmered where the sunlight cut through the canopy. 2 small wings. Not elaborate, just black lines and shadow. The kind of tattoo you get when a promise becomes permanent. She flexed her fingers once, then went back to the gauges. In the knee pocket of her flight suit, an old photo sat folded and creased from years of sweat and motion. A rescue crew. 5 people in front of a half-buried helicopter, snow all around them, wind whipping through their hair. She never looked at it mid-flight, but her thumb brushed the corner out of habit, like touching a relic before battle. The comms were alive again. Someone from Razor Flight broke the silence. Valkyrie 1, this is Razor 2-1. Confirm you're still on station? Still here, she replied. A pause. Then a second voice joined. Older, slower, full of disbelief. Wait! Valkyrie? Static filled the gap. Then, Valkyrie, you mean the Valkyrie? The one from Kunar Valley? Nobody answered. But for a moment, even through the headset, Hayes could feel the temperature in the net change. Pilots who'd been kids in flight school back in '07 had grown up hearing that name whispered like a story. The woman who had flown into the whiteout. The one who refused to leave the wounded behind. She's supposed to be grounded, another voice said, half laughing, half afraid. Hayes adjusted her heading. Focus on the fight, boys. Below, the valley burned in small pockets of light. Bravo Company's position flickered like a heartbeat, still alive, but weak. Every few minutes, new coordinates came in. Each time, she answered without hesitation. Copy. Bravo, Valkyrie on the move, and somewhere between the static and gunfire, her name started to spread. Tell Valkyrie thank you, she's keeping us in this. Valkyrie, we owe you our lives. It moved from squad to squad, from platoon to convoy, like a code word for hope. Even the wounded said it over the medcoms, half delirious. The myth was rebuilding itself mid-battle, out of dust and disbelief. At headquarters, the mood was colder. Officers gathered around Delaney's operations table, the hum of machines and fans filling the pauses between orders. She's violated 2 direct commands, someone said. 3, corrected another. She dropped below minimum altitude, executed unauthorized fire missions, and broke formation. Delaney didn't look up. His eyes stayed on the radar, one blip looping tighter and tighter over Sangin. File the paperwork, he said. The young captain taking notes hesitated. Sir, she's saving them. File it anyway. But his voice lacked conviction. Outside the command tent, a tech sergeant muttered under his breath, You think she's really the same Valkyrie, the one who went dark after Kunar? The older comms chief nodded slowly. Same call sign, same flight pattern. I saw her fly once, same knife-edge dive. Nobody else flies like that. Delaney heard them. He always heard everything. He closed the folder in front of him, thumb tracing the edge where her name was printed. Hayes, Riley A. Captain, USAF. He remembered the briefing back in '07, a rescue op gone wrong, snowstorm so thick you couldn't tell ground from cloud. The pilot who refused to leave after the extraction order was canceled. The report said she broke every rule in the book, landed on a slope nobody else would touch, and carried out 3 wounded men by hand before the bird went down. The official line called it insubordination, resulting in loss of aircraft. Unofficially, it became legend. Delaney had read that report as a younger officer, sitting in a classroom states away. He never forgot the tone of it, half reprimand, half confession. He opened the digital file again now. The black and white ID photo stared back at him. Same sharp eyes. Same controlled calm. The line across her record, status, restricted flight duty. Cause, disciplinary. He exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. She's supposed to be grounded, he whispered. Another lieutenant stepped closer. Sir, what are your orders? Delaney didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the screen. On the live feed, the A-10 curved through the smoke, flares trailing behind it like burning comets. Her altitude read 300 feet far below safe. Look at that, the radar tech murmured. That's surgical flying. Delaney's voice dropped low. That's experience. Out in the desert, Hayes leveled out, her eyes narrowing at a new column of enemy trucks moving toward the ridge. She clicked her mic. Razor 2-1, hold position. I'm rearming for another run. Valkyrie, you're low on ammo and fuel. Command's losing its mind. She almost smiled. They'll get over it. She lined up the shot, the smell of cordite still hanging in the cockpit from the last burst. As her thumb brushed the trigger guard, the edge of her glove shifted again, those faint angel wings barely visible under the fabric. Every time she saw them, she remembered the others. The rescue crew in that frozen valley, the laughter before takeoff, the silence after. One name echoed most, Lieutenant Carter, her co-pilot. The one who never made it back. His voice sometimes came to her in turbulence, the way wind rattles through steel. You bring them home, Riley, every damn one. And she did. The next run went perfectly clean, 2 trucks destroyed, 1 supply line cut. She pulled up through a column of smoke that painted her canopy black for a moment. When she broke through, the sunlight came like a revelation. Bravo Company, this is Valkyrie. Routes open to the south. Move, now. Cheers followed, mixed with disbelief. The words carried back to command through multiple relays, each one punctuated by gratitude. Delaney stood listening. He could hear it even through the static, men on the edge of dying suddenly alive again because one pilot wouldn't obey the silence. Sir, the young officer pressed, should I send the reprimand? Delaney's hand hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked beside her name, waiting. He thought of her voice over the comms, unshaken, clear, almost defiant. The same tone he'd heard once in the archival audio of Kunar Valley. He pulled up that old file, clicked play. Through crackling noise came a younger version of the same voice. This is Valkyrie. I've got them. I'm not leaving without them. He stopped the recording. The tent was silent except for the hum of the monitors. Sir, Delaney closed the laptop slowly. Hold the reprimand. The lieutenant blinked. Sir? He stared at the live feed again. Her A-10 moved like a ghost between smoke columns, dipping and weaving, flares blooming behind her wings. That tone, Delaney said softly. I know that tone. What do you mean? He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. It's the sound of someone who's already been told once that she can't save them, and decided never to hear it again. No one spoke. Outside, the desert thundered with the echo of her cannon fire, each burst carving a line between obedience and duty. By nightfall, the call sign Valkyrie had become more than a word. It was a signal, whispered from radio to radio, the kind that made men lift their heads even in the dark. And somewhere deep in the command post, Major Delaney stared at the frozen image on his screen, a tattoo half hidden by a glove, a name resurrected from a file marked closed and understood, with a kind of dread and awe that Riley Hayes wasn't just breaking orders. She was rewriting history all over again. The wind over Sangin rose like a living thing, pushing smoke sideways, turning it into a gray river that bled off the ridge and ran across the desert. Riley eased Valkyrie into a high orbit and let the engine note settle into that steady iron hum. Through the canopy she saw the convoy coming, the glint of metal, the dark flags whipping, the erratic dust shadows of trucks bouncing over hardpan. Valkyrie 1, you are ordered to RTB, command snapped, voice flat as a blade. That's a direct order. Her thumb rested on the radio switch, the edge of her glove pulled back just enough to show the hint of the angel wings. She could feel her heartbeat in the pads of her fingers. Negative, command, she said, tone level. Not while they're still breathing. Below, tracers stitched the air. The enemy trucks fanned out, the classic Pincer 2 technicals moving wide to flank the southern break, one heavy DSK mounting, steadying in the center. She visualized fields of fire the way some people see music, arcs overlapping, gaps like rests in a measure. Razor 2-1, hold, she said, eyes narrowing. You're fuel critical. Copy, he answered, reluctant. I'm bingo in 5. She rolled her bird, nose down. The cockpit vibrated as altitude bled away. The ridge swelled in the glass like a fist rising from the earth. And suddenly, it was winter again. Kunar, 3 years earlier. The world white, air so cold it tasted like metal. Her HH-60 Pavehawk shuddering under the weight of a mountain's temper. Valkyrie, abort, the controller had said back then, voice strangled by weather. Visibility 0. You can't see your own blades. She'd looked through a windshield painted with ice and seen nothing but blankness. Somewhere in it, a SEAL team bled into the snow. Somewhere to her right, Lieutenant Aaron Carter watched the instruments while his left hand gripped the oh-crap handle tight enough to leave fingerprints. We still have them on IR, Carter had said, voice gentle, a reminder of humanity inside a machine. They're there. Roger, she'd answered, and the word felt like the sound of a decision. She flared the A-10 now, bringing the reticle over the center truck, the one belching black smoke, gunner already braced. The GAU-8 armed with a click she felt in her bones. She breathed out, light on the stick, then pressed. The cannon spoke. A single long sentence of tungsten. The truck disintegrated, the gunner thrown sideways in a flash of sparks and dust. The DSK cut off mid-burst. The other technicals fishtailed, tires biting for purchase. Good hit, Hill shouted, voice redlining. Valkyrie, you're a damn angel. She pulled up, left wing low, the A-10 skimming the ridge so close she could see shrapnel glittering in the sand. The warning lights blinked their quiet complaint. Fuel flow higher than she liked. Ammo count ticking down. Valkyrie 1, command repeated, brittle now. This is Overlord. Return to base immediately. You are outside ROE. Overlord, she said. Be advised, we've got a convoy pressing the south flank. I'm taking them first. Negative. RTB. Unable. The word hung in the net like a flare. In Kunar, Carter had looked sideways at her with a grin that cut the fog. Unable, he'd echoed back then. He'd had a way of making defiance sound like a hymn. They'd gone in blind, rotor wash turning snow into a white hurricane. She could still feel the stick trembling, the engine cough that followed as ice tried to seize the heart of the bird. The LZ had been a rumor-tilted, narrow, slick. She put the Pavehawk down on the ghost of a ledge and told the wind it could scream all it wanted after the men were inside. A crack snapped her back to Sangan rounds pinging off armor. She rolled into another run, targeting the second technical as it hammered the southern route with suppressive fire. Her reticle danced, then steadied as muscle memory overruled fear. Guns, she whispered, and the hog roared consent. The truck bucked, hood blooming open like a bad flower. The men in the back spilled, a handful trying to run against the shockwave. She cut the burst discipline more than mercy and climbed just enough to live through the next 10 seconds. Razor 2-1 is Winchester and bingo, her wingman called, heavy breath shaking his words. I'm climbing out. Get home, she said, already scanning for the third truck. I'll hold. Valkyrie, you can't hold alone. Watch me. Silence from him then. See you on the ramp. In Kunar, Carter had unbuckled first. He'd touched the panel above his head like a chapel door, then kicked the hatch open into a storm that bit skin through gloves. 2 minutes, he'd shouted into her headset. 2, and we leave. No matter what. She'd wanted to argue. She hadn't. She watched his back vanish into night made of snow. Here, now, in Sangan, she saw the third technical try to pivot toward a shallow wash that would give it a protected approach. The wash looked harmless from above. From the ground, it would be a dagger to Bravo's ribs. She rolled to cut it off. Valkyrie, this is Hill, be advised. We've got wounded exposed on the southern line. I'm marking with IR. Copy. I see your sparkle. She dropped lower, the A-10's belly almost kissing the land. The smell of burnt cordite and hot metal seeped through the cockpit since. A pilot either learns to love or never flies again. She brought the reticle across the wash, and gave the ground a long, deliberate warning. The truck braked, the driver aware that the road ahead had just become a bad bet. Then she shifted left, painted the engine block, and pressed a short, precise burst. The truck died mid-swerve. Smoke feathered back. "South route is clear," she said, eyes already moving. "Move your casualties now." "Copy," Hill answered, voice breaking in relief. "Moving." "Valkyrie 1, Overlord cut in, clipped and furious. "This is your final warning. RTB now, or you will be subject to." The rest faded under a rising memory. Kunar again, the shape of Carter reappearing in the white chaos with one man over his shoulder and another dragging behind him. They'd made it 10 steps before the slope betrayed them, boots losing purchase on the ice. The world had tilted. She'd watched his feet slide and her body move before her mind did. She was out of the cockpit, into the storm, hands on the downed man's vest, weight backward, all four of them a tangle of breath and swearing and determination. "Go, go, go," Carter had shouted, shoving them forward. "Bird's not going to love this." "Bird can file a complaint," she'd said, and his laugh had been the warmest sound that Winter had heard. They got 2 aboard. The third lay stubborn in the drift, blood turning black in the cold. Carter went back. She grabbed his sleeve and he shook her off with a grin that apologized for everything he was about to do. The ridge in Sangan rose to meet her again. She climbed to catch breath, then turned her eyes north where muzzle flashes popped like dull stars. Through the haze, she caught a new movement. 5 motorcycles threading the terrain, fast and smart, each rider with a passenger wrapped around a long tube. "RPG team on bikes," she said. "North Ridge, moving to your east. I'll handle." "Copy," Hill said. "We can't reach them." "You don't have to." She put Valkyrie into a shallow dive that felt like leaning into a conversation. The bikes ran a jagged line. She didn't try to hit metal. She hit the space ahead of them, hammers of dirt rising to meet their momentum. 2 toppled. The others wavered. She adjusted fire like she was nudging chess pieces. 1 burst, then a breath, then another, always ahead, always making the next choice expensive. "Holy!" "Razor 2. One said on the open net, watching from altitude he could no longer afford to leave. "That's focus on your fuel," she told him. Back in Kunar, Carter had almost made it. They'd been down to seconds and prayers when the mountain decided it was done being patient. The wind hit the rotors sideways. The bird skated, metal complaining. She'd seen Carter shove the last man upward, arms straining, face a fury of effort, and then the gust had punched them both. She jumped again, harness biting, weight tipping the equation back. The door gunner hauled the casualty inside with a curse that sounded like a plea. Carter grabbed the doorframe with one glove and met her eyes with a look she'd replay 12,000 times. "Go," it said. "Get in," she'd shouted. He shook his head once and smiled, as if it mattered that she saw it. Then the second gust came, a white fist, and the rope line that had looked secure wasn't. She lost him into the storm, not with a scream, but with a silence she would carry like a stone. "Valkyrie, you saved us," Hill said now, pulling her back into heat and dust. "You damned well saved us." "Not yet," she said. Her fuel gauge did math she didn't like. Her ammo counter told a story with the short, last chapter. She checked the clock. If she stayed, she could buy them 10 more minutes. If she left, she could land, refuel, and hope to get back in time to matter. "Razor 2-1, you're clear outbound," she said. "Valkyrie, go." His voice softened. "Copy." "See you when you get back." She didn't answer, because a new sound cut through the frequency. A whistle that meant indirect fire had learned a trick. Mortars. They were bracketing Bravo's last cover. "Hill, mark your east line again." "Marking." The IR sparkle quivered in her HUD, a faint star on a bad map. She put the pipper there and sent a short kiss of rounds to flatten a spot where mortar crew silhouettes hunched. The smell of hot brass filled the small world. Her hands were steady. Her jaw wasn't. "Splash on mortars," she said. "Shift north." "Copy." Shifting. In the command tent, Delaney stood with his headset crooked against one ear and his hand over his mouth. A staff captain hovered at his shoulder, waiting for permission to file the reprimand that sat half-complete on a tablet. The word insubordination blinked in a draft line like a dare. "She's at 200 feet, the radar tech said, unable to keep wonder out of his voice. "She's threading the ridge like a needle." Delaney closed his eyes and heard that younger recording again, the woman in the blizzard saying she was not leaving. He knew the timbre of a soul that had decided a long time ago what it could live with. "Sir?" the captain asked. "Do I send it?" "Not yet," Delaney said, and swallowed something that tasted like old guilt. On the ground, movement shifted in a way you could feel through a canopy, even if you couldn't see it in a scope. The Americans pushing, not just holding. That small difference had a way of multiplying. A sergeant stood taller. A private ran between positions, a second longer than fear advised. "Hope has weight. It changes how a body leans." "Valkyrie," Hill said, breathing hard between words. "Whoever you are, you just changed the fight." She banked to save fuel, let altitude trade for endurance, and took a breath she hadn't allowed herself since the first dive. "Copy," she said softly. "Keep moving." Her mind wanted to wander back to Kunar again, to the moment after, when the bird lifted, lighter in a way that broke the world. She had flown out with 2 men alive and 1 man not, and the radio had been very professional and very calm, and the snow had blurred everything that wasn't crucial, and she had landed at Bagram into a silence that should have been gratitude but was paperwork. There had been an inquiry. There had been phrases like loss of aircraft and deviation from directive. Carter's mother had sent a letter with a sentence she could not forgive or forget. "He believed in you." It had sounded like a benediction and a sentence both. Then the reassignment. The rumor. The name Valkyrie put into a drawer. She looked now at the rescue photo in her knee pocket without looking at it, felt the ghost of the crease against her finger. The wings under her glove prickled with memory. "Overlord," she said, voice quiet and clean. "Valkyrie 1. Be advised, Bravo is maneuvering. I will remain on station until they're clear of the southern ridge." Silence answered. In that silence, she recognized Delaney listening. She had learned the shape of his quiet. Razor 2-1 came on briefly, voice higher now with altitude and relief. "Valkyrie, fuel at home is complicated, but I'll push maintenance to turn me fast." "Don't break your crew," she said. "I'll hold." She let the A-10 slide into a long, lazy S to keep moving without giving the enemy a ruler to measure with. 2 more bursts in 2 more places that needed the reminder. A false advance cut off. A machine gun next seen as smoke. Her last magazine down to quiet. "Hill," she said, "I'm almost Winchester." "Copy," he said. "You've done enough. Not until you're off that ridge." He laughed then, a raw, exhausted sound. "Yes, ma'am." She checked fuel again. If she left now, she could make it with room. If she stayed 2 more minutes, she'd land on fumes the color of prayer. The choice lay on the instrument panel like a coin she refused to flip. "Valkyrie 1, Overlord came back, exhausted anger softened by something older. "State fuel," she told them, because some lies break more than rules. "RTB recommended," the controller said, words careful. "We have you recorded as unable," she said, and smiled without joy at the déjà vu. 2 more minutes. "Understood," the voice said quietly. 2 more minutes. Delaney closed his eyes, and in the command tent no one spoke. She put Valkyrie into one last working turn and let every lesson she'd paid for with scar tissue do the math. She turned her cannon into punctuation marks. She turned enemy momentum into grammar errors. She turned 2 minutes into the kind of time that stretches to make room for lives. When she finally climbed, light-headed and dry-mouthed, the ridge below was a different place. Movement southward, a line like ants just visible in the dust, organized, purposeful, stubbornly alive. "Bravo Company," she said, "you're clear to the south. Keep your spacing. Use the wash for cover." "Copy all," Hill replied. "We're moving. You're—" He stopped, recalibrated. "Thank you." She angled toward home and felt the hog's gratitude in the way the engine note brightened. The air flattened against the canopy as if to slow her, to ask if she was sure. Part of her wanted to turn back for one more look, Part of her knew that courage also knows when to leave a gift alone. "Valkyrie 1, Delaney said at last, his voice the sound of a man who had seen a ghost and greeted it by name. "Tower cleared direct. You'll have the runway." "Copy direct," she answered, because there is dignity in the simple acknowledgement of grace. As the desert slid beneath her like a page turning, a memory slid with it. Carter's smile in the snow, the human weight of the man whose last act was to shove someone else into the helicopter. She carried him with her the way she carried fuel, constantly measured, absolutely essential, never enough. "Razor 2-1, she said, catching his transponder blinking near the edge of her scope. "Save me a spot on the ramp." "Always," he said. She brought Valkyrie home on the straightest of lines, made lighter by everything that couldn't be seen. Thanks rising like heat from a valley, grief that never found a throat, and a name that had just been put back where it belonged. Would you risk your career to save 280 lives? Or would you obey the order and live with the silence? Delaney burst through the double doors of the ops center, his voice cutting through the hum of electronics and overlapping chatter. "Status on Valkyrie 1. The room went still. Dozens of eyes flicked to the wall of screens where a single blip pulsed at the edge of the tactical map. A radar technician swallowed hard. "She's still on station, sir." "Fuel's below minimum." "Below minimum?" Delaney snapped. "Then why is she still fighting?" No one answered. He paced to the wall, every step echoing through the tense silence. That's when he saw it, the old black and white photo pinned above the radio console. A young pilot in snow gear stood in front of a downed HH-60, arm around another crewman, both of them grinning through exhaustion. "Operation Iron Dagger. Kunar Valley 2010 scrawled underneath in faded ink. "That's her," whispered a tech sergeant near the corner. "The pilot from Iron Dagger. The one who pulled the Rangers out in the blizzard." Delaney froze. The photo hit him like a shell burst. He looked from the picture to the radar, then back again. "You're telling me that's Hayes?" "Yes, sir," the sergeant said quietly. "Same tattoo, same call sign. She was grounded after that mission. They said she broke command." Delaney's voice dropped to a whisper. "She didn't break command. She saved a full platoon." He stared at the flickering map, memory flooding in, the classified debriefs, the quiet rumor of a pilot who landed where no one else dared. They called her reckless, impossible, insubordinate. But the Rangers called her something else. Guardian Angel. "Patch me through to Valkyrie," he ordered. "Sir, she's out of fuel," a controller protested. "We'll lose her if she keeps flying." Delaney's jaw tightened. "Then tell her, the sky is hers." The room hesitated. That sentence broke every protocol in the book. But the tone in his voice left no room for debate. The controller nodded, hands trembling as he flipped the channel open. Across the open comms, the message went out. "Valkyrie 1, command authorizes full strike discretion. The sky is yours." Down in the valley, every soldier heard it. Radios crackled. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the wounded stopped moving. Hill looked up from behind a broken wall, disbelief in his eyes. Did command just say that? The comms hissed. Then, clear as sunlight through dust, her voice came back, calm, unshaken. "Copy that. For every one of ours, we take back 10. A hush fell over the battlefield. Then the roar came. Valkyrie rolled her A-10 inverted, nose diving straight into the storm of tracers. The GAU-8 cannon spun up with that deep metallic growl that soldiers recognize before they even see the aircraft. Her rounds tore through enemy lines like thunder-given shape, rows of explosions walking across the ridge. From the ground, it looked like the heavens themselves had split open. Taliban positions that had held for hours disintegrated. Technicals turned to fireballs, sand lifted in waves. The enemy fire sputtered, then stopped altogether. "Jesus," Hill muttered, eyes wide. She's not even flinching." Her final run was lower than any sane pilot would risk. The altimeter screamed, alarms lit the cockpit red. She could feel the ground tugging at her. But the targets ahead still moved, and until they stopped moving, she wasn't done. "Valkyrie, break off!" Delaney's voice cracked through the headset. "You've done enough." She didn't answer. She lined up one last pass, the ridge stretching beneath her like a scar that needed sealing. Her thumb pressed the trigger. The gun barked once more, short, perfect bursts. The explosions rolled across the horizon, chasing one another into silence. Then, all at once, the valley went still. No muzzle flashes, no return fire. Just the echo of cannon thunder bouncing off the distant hills, fading into nothing. Hill stepped out from cover, dust clinging to his face. The surviving soldiers looked around in stunned quiet. One by one, they realized what had just happened. The impossible had been done. "She did it," Hill whispered. "She turned the damn battle." Back in the ops center, every monitor showed the same thing. Enemy movement vanishing, friendly positions stabilizing. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief giving way to awe. Delaney didn't speak. He just exhaled and stared at the small blinking dot on the screen. Valkyrie 1, still circling the ridge, running on fumes and sheer will. He lowered his headset slowly, eyes on the photo again. "Welcome back, Valkyrie," he said under his breath. Outside, the desert wind carried the last echo of her engine, a sound that every soldier on that field would remember for the rest of their lives. Dust settled, fire dimmed. And for the first time that day, the sky above Sangin was quiet. The desert had turned gold again by the time the last firefight faded into memory. Smoke still curled from the ridge, the kind that stings your nose even from a mile away. One by one, shapes began to move below, dust-caked men dragging stretchers, carrying each other, raising hands to signal friendly. 280 of them, alive. When the first medevac Black Hawks thundered in, their rotors churned the sand into halos over the landing zone. Medics spilled out, shouting names, tagging the wounded, hauling gear. Somewhere amid the chaos, Sergeant Hill looked up. His throat tightened. "Holy hell," he whispered, nudging the man next to him. "Look." Over the valley, low enough to rattle helmets and heartbeats, came the unmistakable growl of the A-10. Bullet holes lined her wings, soot streaked across the fuselage, but she was still flying. The sunlight hit her metal skin and made her look almost alive. The pilots in the medevac crews paused to watch. They knew that sound. The rough, beautiful song of a machine that refuses to die until everyone else is safe. She dipped her wings once. A small, almost tender gesture. The soldiers below erupted in cheers, weak but full of gratitude. Some saluted. Some just lifted their rifles skyward in respect. Hill grinned through the exhaustion, dust streaking his face. "That's her," he murmured. "That's Valkyrie." Hours later, back at Bagram Airfield, the hangar lights burned through the evening haze. The air reeked of hydraulic fluid and adrenaline. Crew chiefs and mechanics swarmed the battered A-10, whispering like surgeons around a patient who just survived the impossible. Flaps shot through, main gear holding somehow, fuel lines barely intact, but she'd made it. Captain Riley Hayes climbed down from the cockpit, legs stiff, face streaked with grime. Her eyes were bloodshot but steady. A few mechanics froze when they saw the faint tattoo under her glove, the black wings against pale skin. Word had spread fast. "Ma'am," one of them stammered, trying not to sound emotional. You need anything?" She shook her head. "Just water." They scrambled to get it anyway. The hangar went quiet as Major Delaney entered. The chatter stopped, wrenches lowered, every movement suspended. He walked straight toward her, expression unreadable. Behind him trailed a line of officers, some from command, some from public affairs, all pretending not to be impressed. She saluted. He didn't return it right away. He just stood there, studying the woman who had once been a cautionary tale in every flight safety briefing. "Captain Riley Hayes," he began, his voice carrying over the stillness. "Call sign Valkyrie." He paused, letting the weight of her name hang in the air. "For the second time," he said, "you ignored direct orders." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking to the floor. Delaney took another step closer. "And for the second time," he continued, softer now, "you brought everyone home." The silence that followed was electric alive, waiting. Then Delaney raised his right hand. He saluted her. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, one by one, the entire hangar followed. Pilots, mechanics, technicians. Men who had spent their lives under discipline, now standing at attention not because they were ordered to, but because it was right. The sound of boots clicking together filled the air. Riley's throat tightened. She didn't move for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight, the very people who had once doubted her now standing in full salute. She returned it slowly, hand trembling just slightly. Delaney's voice broke the silence again. "You've cost me a mountain of paperwork, Captain," he said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "But I'll take that over a mass casualty report any day." A small ripple of laughter spread, soft and relieved. It was the kind that comes only after terror's long shadow lifts. When the sound died down, Delaney turned to the crowd. "For those of you who weren't here 5 years ago," he said, "this woman was the pilot behind Operation Iron Dagger, the reason a Ranger platoon ever saw home again. She paid for that with her record. Today, she paid again, with her fuel, her aircraft, and nearly her life. And once again, she saved them all." Applause erupted, loud, raw, unfiltered. It filled the hangar, bouncing off the metal walls, rolling like thunder. Mechanics cheered from scaffolds. A tech sergeant who'd once whispered rumors wiped his eyes with a sleeve. Hayes tried to step back, uncomfortable in the center of it, but Delaney stopped her with a glance. "Stand easy," he said quietly. "You've earned this." One of the younger crewmen, barely 20, freckles still visible through the grease on his face, leaned toward a fellow mechanic and whispered, "She's the reason half of them get to see their families again." The other nodded. "Yeah. And the reason the rest of us remember why we started this job." At the far end of the hangar, the battered A-10 sat in silence. Her skin was torn and scorched, but she looked proud, like she'd carried not just ammunition, but faith. Someone had taped a hand-lettered note to her fuselage. "Valkyrie saved us." Riley noticed it on her way out. She stopped, tracing the letters with her fingertips, and smiled faintly. "Good work, old girl," she whispered to the plane. Delaney joined her, standing shoulder to shoulder. "They're already calling it the miracle at Sangan," he said. She exhaled. "I don't believe in miracles, sir, just people doing what needs to be done." He looked at her, then nodded. "Maybe that's what miracles are." They stood in silence, listening to the echo of applause fading into night. Somewhere outside, a transport roared to life, another mission beginning. Delaney finally turned back toward the hangar doors. "Get some rest, Hayes," he said. "Debrief in the morning. You've earned about 10 years of sleep." She gave a tired grin. "Copy that, sir." As she walked away, the base lights shimmered on the edge of the tarmac, glinting off the wings of the A-10 like faint silver feathers. For once, she didn't feel like she was running from the past. She felt like she'd flown right through it and come out clean on the other side. Behind her, a young airman watched her disappear into the night and whispered, "That's Valkyrie." Another answered softly, "Yeah." The one who never leaves anyone behind. And outside, somewhere far off in the quiet desert, the wind carried that name half myth, half prayer across the sand. Weeks later, the hangar was quiet again. The rush of mechanics, the bark of radios, the hum of engines, all of it had faded back into the routine hum of maintenance and memory. Riley Hayes sat alone at the end of the flight line, hands cupped around a chipped mug of black coffee gone cold. The metal chair beneath her creaked softly in the night air. Outside, rain tapped on the hangar roof, rare, almost gentle. Her A-10 sat 20 yards away, patched, painted, and grounded for scheduled refit. Someone had washed off the sand, but the scars still showed through the dull gray paint. The crew chiefs had left a single word chalked under the cockpit canopy: respect. News had traveled fast. The journalists called it the miracle at Sangan. Every network ran the same photo, smoke curling over the valley, a battered A-10 banking through it like a guardian angel. They used words like heroism, defiance, redemption. She never corrected them, but when anyone asked, she gave the same quiet answer: "I was just doing my job." On the workbench beside her, her tablet buzzed once. An incoming message from Sergeant Hill. She opened it. The image filled the screen. 280 soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, sun blazing behind them. Their faces were dusty, bandaged, exhausted, but smiling. Behind them, a hand-painted banner fluttered between two flagpoles. Valkyrie, save the us. For a long moment, Riley didn't move. She just stared at the picture, eyes tracing every blurred edge, every grin that shouldn't have existed. Then she smiled, small, tired, but real. She whispered to the empty hangar, "I didn't save them, we saved each other." The hum of distant engines answered her, faint as a heartbeat. Outside, Delaney paused at the door, watching from the shadows. He didn't interrupt. He just saw the way she looked at that picture, the way her shoulders eased for the first time in years. He knew she'd never need medals or speeches or another line in her file. The mission had already written her story in the only ink that mattered. Human lives still breathing. He left her in peace. Riley set the mug down, leaned back, and looked out at the dark runway stretching into nowhere. Her reflection flickered faintly in the glass, older, calmer, still carrying ghosts. She thought of Carter again, of the snowstorm in Kunar, of the promise she made that day when she refused to leave anyone behind. She wondered if he would have approved of what she'd done. Then she smiled again, soft and certain. Yeah, she thought. He would have. The night deepened, the rain easing to a drizzle. Her A-10 gleamed under the floodlights, the wings spreading wide and patient. She finished her coffee, stood, and brushed dust from her flight suit. For the first time in a long time, her chest felt light, not from pride, but from peace. Because sometimes victory isn't the roar of engines or the sound of applause. It's a quiet hangar, a cold mug, and the knowledge that everyone came home. Sometimes the bravest act isn't pulling the trigger, it's refusing to look away when everyone else follows the rules. True courage isn't in defying orders for pride. It's in knowing when duty demands something greater. It's in the quiet moments afterward, when a soldier looks at the faces they saved and finally lets themselves breathe. Some names never make the headlines, but their courage echoes through every soldier who came home because someone refused to stand down. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.